Right, I wonder if we could perhaps bring Peter through, and then we'll have both together. We've also got another slide display about the archive and registry, but I don't know if people would like to ask we can say our panel now to John or Peter. So do we have anybody died to ask some questions?
No, could I just, because while we're still on Peter, I would like to present our petition. Yeah.
Okay, if you'd like to do that, John, do you want to come up here?
Yeah, I just want to go through. I just want to go through the points we've made so that people understand. Peter,
we'll ask questions.
Peter, who was going to sign this, is a bit worried about the first paragraph. So we might have...
This is the petition from the Arctic Meeting of...
You should all have one of these sheets. Okay, anybody not got one? Brian, can you give a sheet to people who haven't got one? Give a sheet of the petition sheet. Yeah, to people who haven't got one. What we're saying is basically what John has just said. We've got to act. And we've got to act pretty quick because things are getting very much worse. The climate modellers have been completely denying what's going on and the seriousness of it. And we've got a vicious cycle of the sea ice going, more sunshine. Yeah. The point is, we think that it's highly probable we've reached a point of no return if we don't act within months, literally within months. We do have to stop there being a collapse next year as bad as this year, if we possibly can. And that probably involves some nasty things, but we've got to do it because otherwise the vicious cycle will carry on and then we'll be sunk because all the other things, the methane will come out, the weather will get very much worse. So that's the reason for the petition. Now, what I would like you to do, if you've got one of these sheets, is to take it home and give it to your friends to sign and send it to me, and my address is at the bottom. And if you haven't signed, put a name on the signature with 10 people per page, please do so. That's available.
Great.
Okay. Basically, we want to cut through all the nonsense from the Met Office about laissez-faire and go straight to the heads of state and get them to act.
Great. Okay. So if anybody would like to sign the AMA petition, there it is. You can read it and you can see. You can see what. Okay. Let's have a question for John or Peter or both at this end.
Do you think we could learn any lessons from the ozone layer and the CFC campaign that seemed to have been quite effective initially sort of locally and then globally?
Yes. Yes, but it was very, very, very much easier. You only had 6 companies effectively who were producing all the CFCs, and it was in their competitive advantage to change to an alternative one. So this is, we've got 190 countries, and okay, fair enough, you only got 15 or 20 major emitters. But just as we've seen from the climate talks, these are deadlocked, and something quite extraordinary will have to happen to unlock that thing. So I'm not over optimistic, frankly, on that level. I wish it were as easy as the CFC thing, because that was remarkable, but it was unusual.
Yeah, I agree. It was fairly simple to do. Take one action, and it can sort of save the world from that. But it's much more complex than you would.
I was thinking of political coordination as well, but that's a totally different size problem. But
Again, fantastic thing. I mean, if Obama gets through again in November, which, let's assume that he does, then I think we've got much more chance of political lead from America because he will be so buoyed. So I think if America gives a lead, and what was very, very interesting, again, from that little Arctic trip, and when that record was set, the American press started really waking up. So you had the New York Times, you had all the American press, and they haven't been interested in climate change, but they are interested in the Arctic. So it's quite a simple one to make that link. So I know the NSIDC were briefing Al Gore, and they were certainly hoping to brief Obama this week. So when that's happened, I don't know.
Right, Peter's got a challenging question, I'm sure.
I was hoping, John, you could provide some balance in the debate on geoengineering. I'd like to know what your opinions are. I'd like to know what your opinions are on geoengineering. Peter mentioned how large-scale food production feeds our growing population, but there's another body of opinion that says that small-scale food production is both more productive, more nutritious, the Schumacher model of agriculture rather than the great agribusinesses that are in fact exacerbating climate change and biodiversity loss and all those factors. Now, it's already been mentioned that geoengineering will require coordination of governments and a harnessing of resources on a massive scale that's probably not been seen before except in fascist countries. I'd like to know, please, what your personal opinion is on geoengineering solutions to the climate crisis, but also how can you muster the resources and the political will to affect geoengineering solutions, and why can they not be put into more sustainable measures? Well, we know why, because business does not want peasant agriculture. But you will lobby these resources into a indefinite project without calculating.
Okay, I think the geoengineering question is a vast but slightly premature thing. We probably disagree here, and my kind of job is to be very sceptical of the proposals which are being pushed forward ever more forcefully by some very, very talented and extremely interesting geoengineers. My real problem is, how do you control it? Is it reversible? How much is it going to cost? What effects will it have on the poorest? In whose benefit is it? Who's going to profit? Etc., etc., etc. And all of these questions are so immense that, and they are going to require global agreement. If you cannot get global agreement to reduce the emissions, how are you going to get global agreement to get massive geoengineering commitment, given it's going to cost so much? So I see it as a sort of slightly dead end. What I'm slightly frightened of is a kind of gung-ho American. There are some brilliant geoengineers. I mean, let's go and basically going it alone, and businesses and Mr. Branson or whoever or Mr. Gates and they're all in it. And just saying, right, okay, we're going to do it because the world needs it. And I think that then we're into very, very uncharted waters, and it's terrifying. So I think geoengineering has got to be, for me, the absolute last resort, which I hope I never, ever have to think about again. I know you disagree.
No, I don't entirely disagree. I mean, I agree that one of the problems is with geoengineering is it costs so much to do, and there's the unintended side effects. There'll be benefits for many, well, maybe for the whole planet, but there'll be disbenefits for some, and yet it's being applied globally. So the countries that would suffer are going to be very annoyed that somebody is modifying their climate without them being involved. So I can't see international agreement ever being obtained. And I agree with you there that's if it's hard to get agreement on reducing carbon emissions, which ought to be, which is so obviously to the benefit of everybody, then it's going to be even harder to get agreement where some people are actually going to be suffering, and they're not going to object.
Right.
this crisis that we've got in the Arctic is it's going to be so overwhelming. One of the principal scientists who's looked at the effect of the Arctic on the global weather says we're moving into a completely new climate for the whole planet. It's not just the Arctic, it's the whole planet. We've got a real emergency here. We've got to take emergency actions. Geoengineering is something we have to consider in an emergency. We've got an emergency. We mustn't close any doors. John Hodgman said that, and he got pummeled for it, but he said we must keep geoengineering on the table for an emergency. We have an emergency.
Right, okay. I think it's worth saying that whatever happens, it's inconceivable that geoengineering would work on its own, as I see it, without very substantial emissions reductions. It's just not feasible. Otherwise, you're sort of pedaling, backwards. It would be insane. So whatever happens, we need to, get the world together for a big effort around reducing global emissions. I think is a pretty reasonable thing to say. But okay, so this gentleman over here.
A couple of things. One on geoengineering, one on Arctic ice. I think Professor Wadham just touched on this about geoengineering is potentially dangerous politically as a conflict issue. You can just imagine, forget America, you can imagine China doing something on their own and affecting the monsoons, or in India, Pakistan, being blamed for it. There's also a risk that they hadn't actually impacted the monsoons, they're still being blamed for it. So it could be a major flashpoint for conflict. So I wonder what your thoughts on that. And the other, with the Arctic ice, I think you said 2007 was impacted because partially the weather is very thin ice. I think I just looked at NOAA and Met Office, it's saying partly, again, it was a cyclone in the region. Obviously thin ice breaks up and melts. But what is the risk of, should next year it not have, it still be low Arctic ice, but not quite as low as this year because there's a bit of variability and no storms in the region. How, saying this year and next year, it's not quite as bad. Is there a risk of the impact of the media being, it's just, I don't know, I wouldn't say alarmist, but you know what I mean?
I think what astonished a lot of scientists, I hesitate, I'm not a scientist, but I deeply respect what they're trying to do. But what seemed to stagger so many scientists was that whereas in 2007, where you saw this massive reduction from 2006 and previous years, all the conditions, all the meteorological conditions were favourable to a massive ice melt. This year, it wasn't. It was absolutely the opposite. It was a very ordinary year. There was nothing special about it. And that's where Stroeve and NSIDC were rather staggered, that this came kind of out of the blue. It wasn't expected. There was nothing to show in April or May or June that we were going to get this. And so that's where it's the rapidity of the melt, the rate of change, which has so astonished people.
I agree, but in NOAA, the American National Oceanic and whatever it is, we've got an August sea ice report that's saying it was low this year, but August particularly dropped off because of a massive cyclone in the region. So you're correct. April, May, February, till then. And then suddenly in August we had this big cyclone. So is there not a risk of next year there'll be a big cyclone and it's low, but not quite as low as this year, and suddenly what you're saying to the media just say, it wasn't as bad as last year, there's no tipping point, let's forget it.
No, I wasn't actually surprised by what happened this year because we'd been predicting that because of the thinning of the ice. But when we talk about cyclones, actually the situation wasn't surprising because what was, I suppose, meaningful was that there weren't any severe storms in relation to what you normally get. I mean, you had a couple of storms, but the only reason they had a big effect was because the ice had already retreated so much that the storms were able to produce a lot of wave energy, and the wave energy broke the ice up and accelerated the retreat of the ice. So that storms, when the ice is already in retreat, storms, even if they're not out of the ordinary, they have a bigger effect than they used to have in the days when there was plenty of ice around, because it just moved the ice about. Whereas now, it's producing really heavy seas, and the seas really smash the ice up. In fact, we're going out next year to work on that problem of to what extent is the retreat of the ice accelerated by waves produced in the open water. This is with American funding, I should say, and the other work we're doing is with European funding. So John's statement about there should be British money for this is well taken. But yes, that's the thing that I don't think these cyclones that people have talked about are out of the ordinary. They were normal, but they had a bigger effect than they would have had in the past because the ice wasn't there, and they were able to produce big waves, and then the waves smashed up what ice was left. So I would still predict that there'll be a continued retreat in the next 3 years or so, leading to.
Can we move, give somebody else a chance, actually, if we could? Otherwise it'll become a two-way thing. Phil from in the back. Yeah.
One of the slides you showed was, one of the explanations was that the trend is for precipitation in the north and dry weather in some of the African equatorial areas further south. Are there models which show that this is going to be a continuing trend? And if it is a continuing trend, what happens when the ice melts? Would the weather then stabilise?
I'll try and answer that. I think what Stroeve and people were finding, and NSIDC were finding with the ice, was that the speed of its the sort of decomposition, the speed of its melt, was actually now well below, or below the predicted models. And so the models which they've done for the IPCC report, which will be in 2014, the next one, the data has already gone to the IPCC. I think the cut-off date was last week. And already they are below, the observational data shows it's below where the predicted models are. So again, we're coming to that point where it's kind of off the map, and we don't know. So when it comes to what are the effects going to be in Africa or wherever, we don't know, I don't think. I mean, all we do know is that climate change tends to be a magnifier of what is already there, and that's why we're seeing much more melt in the Arctic, say, than elsewhere. So we can guarantee that, if it's warm and wet normally, it will be warmer and wetter, and if it's dry, it will probably be drier. So the knock-on effects on food or agriculture will probably be even more immense.
As I say, I'm afraid I have to leave to catch my last train back.
Great.
But thank you very much for having me.
Great, thanks so much for that. Giving us the privilege of that fascinating insight into what's happening at this critical time. So we'll move on. I'm not sure.